Welcome back to the Saturday Scholars College Football Podcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. That is Zan. I am Shub, and we are here to do Week 3 recap. We were told it was going to be a sleepy week. There wasn't a lot of primetime games. It wasn't worth watching this week. And what happens every time they say that? There's always some great games. There's always crazy stuff that happens. And it certainly did, as expected. We are Gonzo-less today, at least for the beginning of this podcast. He'll be joining on later for picks at the very latest towards the end of this pod. Big week for Week 4, by the way. But let's take a little deep dive into Week 3. I think the early slate, I was paying pretty heavy attention, especially early on in the day. I was able to watch a handful of games. I had my eyes on that Missouri-Kansas State game pretty much, and then Minnesota-UNC from the jump. I guess, where do you want to start? Kansas State, Missouri? Because that was a great game.
That's the best game to start with. Really competitive game. And quite honestly, glad I took the Missouri over. It's looking really good right now. I didn't put money on it, but just for the sake of our actual bets, makes me wish I put the money on it. But hey, man, Luther Burden's starting to look really good. I know we were kind of saying he got underutilized last year, or maybe he was we didn't use the word bust, but maybe he just wasn't cracked out to his rating. But he's looking really good. He torched them for 2 touchdowns. Kansas State is kind of in a little bit of an enigma. Maybe they lost because I know Will Howard got a little bit injured. He was a little gimpy and he couldn't run. He lost some mobility. I think that probably played into why, Kansas State struggled a little bit in the second half. But great win for Missouri, man. After they got the false start that pushed it from a 56-yard field goal to a 61-yard field goal, or delayed game, not false start, I was like, what the hell, Missouri? You guys are going to lose yourself the game. But luckily, they got a big boy kicker who's got a big boy leg. So those quarter pounders are powering up that leg, man. And that thing flew through the uprights and secured Mizzou a win. They stormed the field, Shub, and they got charged $100,000.
Stupid SEC rules, man. Let them charge. Let them storm the field. Yeah, the guy's name's the Thicker Kicker. That's his name. And you're right, man. Those quarter pounders really help you get your max distance from like a 57-yarder to a 61-yarder. And yeah, that was pretty awesome. It was a great game. And I think going into that game, we were pretty high on Kansas State. We all thought Kansas State was the better team. We thought it'd be relatively competitive, but we thought K-State was better. And I don't know about you, but from what I watched from that game, that looked like 2 pretty evenly matched teams, if you're going to ask me. Is this more about Kansas State being a little bit worse than you expected, or is this about Missouri being better than you expected?
I think Missouri being a little better because, Kansas State has played, let's go with Troy, for instance. And Troy's not a scrub of a team, and they absolutely smacked Troy. I think Kansas State is also a very well-coached team, too. I think the quarterback injury plays into account a little bit. But ultimately, we went over this in win totals. Missouri's got a good defense. They've got a really good defense. Missouri's got some weapons on offense. So it's just a matter of, can the quarterbacks put it together? Can Drinkwitz figure something out? And that's kind of where we drew the line. We were like, I don't know about Cook. I don't know about their options at QB. That's their limiting factor. But hey, right now, Missouri looks like they're starting to figure some stuff out on offense. And with how good their defense is, this is a legitimate maybe 8-win team in the SEC, 9 wins if they play their cards really right. They're looking pretty good.
I have to agree with you there. I do like Missouri a lot, and we talked about this off camera. We like a lot of their individual players. And how about the quarterback, Brady Cook? Like, he's no Caleb Williams, he's no Drake May, but like, he looks very much improved from last year. Last year, Missouri's quarterback play as a whole was not very good at all. Brady Cook, he's not going to put up eye-popping numbers, but from what I've seen so far, and the stats kind of back it up, it looks like he's progressed a lot, and it looks like he's a solid quarterback. If anything,
played a hell of a game.
Yeah, and with the state of quarterbacks in the SEC this year, he's at minimally a top half quarterback in the SEC, I think now. You can make an argument he's maybe like top 5, 6. It's good if you're Missouri. Luther Burden, he is him. Ben Sinnott for Kansas State, he is him. It was fun to watch. This was a great game. I'm glad this was one of the noon kickoffs because it was an entertaining start to the day. But yeah, I guess we'll get into this more. But Big 12 just on a whole is just taking some L's right now, man. But
it's not a good year. And The irony, man, the real irony here is the Big 12 wins the battle for conference supremacy against the Pac 12. And the Pac 12 looks like the absolute cream of all college football right now. And the Big 12 looks like the absolute shit used to grow the wheat for the cream and wheat, in all college football. So it's kind of interesting how that flipped because the Big 12 has been probably the third best conference in the last 4 or 5 years. But all of a sudden, we had this changing trajectory, and this would be at the worst time for the Big 12 as well. This is the absolute worst time for the Big 12 to have this changing trajectory to where OU and Texas are the only two ranked teams in the Big 12, and the rest of the league is floundering. It's crazy.
Now, really quick, let me ask you this. Do you think Missouri could be the second best team in the SEC East this year?
Yes,
I
I
think so
do.
too. I do
Tennessee
too.
is not what we thought they were. They were down. I picked Florida to cover. Happy I did, but I didn't think Florida was going to win that game.
I didn't
And
either. I'm glad I was
yeah,
wrong.
and hats off. But the thing is, Tennessee showed some signs of weakness in the early season, and that's why I didn't feel as comfortable in that line, especially because they always struggle in the swamp historically. And now Virginia, I know they ended up blowing out Virginia, but that game was really close for like the whole first half. With reason, and Virginia is awful. They can't win a football game. So, yeah, man, I think Tennessee's probably the third or fourth best team in the East. I think Mizzou has a really good shot to maybe even upset Georgia because Georgia hasn't even been very. I don't want to say like competitive. Georgia because that's not the word.
They
They're
haven't been
winning their
dominant. They
games,
haven't been
but
dominant.
they haven't been dominant. That's the
Yeah.
word. And with that being said, I think Missouri might have an outside chance to beat Georgia this year. They're looking pretty good.
Well, remember last year they almost beat Georgia last year. Remember they were like
Hmm.
winning until the fourth quarter and then they choked that one away. I mean, even last year they kind of had Georgia's number, but I mean,
I can't lie, Shub. I think Eli Drinkwitz is an absolute dork, but and I really don't like him. But I mean, he's getting results.
he is getting results and he's recruiting probably above Missouri's weight class, if you're going to ask me, especially with some of these splashy recruits they've been getting. Yeah,
Missouri
if you're a
legislator
Missouri
helps with that,
fan,
but yeah.
yeah, right, that is true. But at the same time, they got Luther Burden in there before that rule and everything, before that law passed. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Drinkwitz. I remember I said going into last year, I thought that guy was on the hot seat, but he's definitely not on the hot seat. I think Missouri fans got to be pretty happy. But as far as the SEC East, I know we kind of touched on this game briefly. Tennessee, Florida. I mean, let's knock it out here. I mean, listen, all I got to say is, how you were saying Tennessee didn't look good against Virginia. We were talking about that last week, how I was looking at some stuff, especially as the week went on. I was seeing more and more advanced stuff coming out about Tennessee and the breakdown of those stats and Milton from the first two games. And it was like, okay, wait a minute. Tennessee might not actually be this good. And these are the warning signs. And I guess we'll find out against Florida. And we found out. And I will say this, Florida played the perfect game plan. They needed to keep Tennessee's offense off the field, and offensively, Florida just needed to keep running the ball and just sit on it. And they were able to get out to a lead early in the first half. They got a couple turnovers too, which was nice. It really played out perfectly for Florida, and they executed. I was pretty impressed. I think Florida's looked way better than they did against Utah, and yeah, I think you got to downgrade Tennessee.
I mean, people seem to forget Tennessee lost a lot of really good wide receivers from last season. They lost Hendon Hooker. And look, Joe Milton, he's doing okay. He's not doing terrible. But people seem to forget that he wasn't very good at Michigan. He wasn't very good in his past stops. Definitely a downgrade. It doesn't matter if you can throw the ball 90 yards if you can't hit the target. Now, I'm not going to sit here and completely disparage Joe Milton because he hasn't played horribly, but he's definitely a step down from Hendon Hooker. I'll tell you that much. And also the loss of the wide receivers, man. I mean, it was written in stone that this team was going to take a step back. But I think the only reason that we were still somewhat high on Tennessee is because that veer and shoot offense. We thought that maybe it could be applicable to another quarterback, and you maintain the same system. They also play in the SEC East, so we thought that maybe the East being the weaker side of the spectrum, Tennessee could still have a pretty good season. But right now, it's looking like Tennessee might be fighting for like an 8-4 like kind of deal. So we'll see. We'll see. There's a lot of season left.
Yeah, I'd say maybe even less than that, man. I mean, 7-5, even 6-6, I think is on the table for Tennessee. I mean, look, their schedule, they got to play A&M and at Alabama in the West crossover. And then on top of that,
Luckily,
I mean,
Alabama's very beatable this year.
they are very beatable, but it's still A&M and at Alabama. You're not going to be probably not going to be favored against Alabama, maybe at home against A&M. And then you already lost to Florida. That loss is in the bank. Who are the other two toss-up teams in the East? Kentucky and Missouri are kind of now sort of toss-up games with Tennessee. Tennessee's got to play both those teams on the road.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, I think we got to recalibrate Tennessee here. This might be 7-5. But if you're
True.
Florida, on the other hand, if you're Florida, I also think this might be 7-5, and 7-5 is a good thing because it was looking like no bowl game not
A
too long
difference of
ago.
expectations, right?
It's all about expectations, man.
It's interesting because, Kentucky, despite them being undefeated, they haven't looked impressive to me. I think they're actually, I don't think they're that good, to be honest with you, Kentucky, but
Yeah.
hey, they're undefeated and that's what matters. Speaking of not looking very good, Shub, Florida State, they almost blew the game against Boston College. The only reason they won the game is because they stopped Boston College's 2-point conversion, 31-29 final. What do you make of that game?
So this one was weird because I kind of figured going into the game, I saw Florida State. I believe they had two starting offensive linemen out. And of course, they had the hurricane kind of going through there. And, it wasn't really that big of a deal. But I was just thinking, like, this just totally seems like the type of game where it's a trap game. FSU's probably not going to play their A game. They're just going to try
Looking
to
ahead to
sit on the
Clemson.
ball. Yeah, just try to get out of there, get ready for Clemson. And at first, I was like, "Yep, here we go. This is the classic trap game." And then FSU started to pull away. I believe in like late in the second quarter,
I think
goes into
they were up
halftime.
by like 3 scores.
Yeah, midway through the second half, I believe they're up by like 3 scores, and I was like, "All right, all right, we know." I saw on Twitter, you got Danny Cannell, you got all these FSU people saying like, "All right, it's time to bench Jordan Travis. Like, let's keep him healthy for Clemson." And then I look, and then you're texting us in the group chat. You're like, BC might have a chance to win. I'm like, what the hell? I stopped paying attention to it because I was paying attention to the other games, and I was like, what? It was crazy. I didn't get eyes on it, but yeah, the fact that it came down to a potential 2-point conversion that decided the game ultimately, and BC basically penalized themselves out of a potential game-winning drive too. Yeah, it's one of those weird weeks, man. And Florida State wasn't the only one. But I will say this: are you concerned about Florida State at all after this?
Uh, it's hard to make heads or tails of this because Boston College is not a good team. They're
No.
not a good team. Um, but God, man, I mean, this makes me reevaluate things. How good was LSU? Or was that just early season blues, like not being ready or whatever the case may be? I really just don't have a firm grasp on how good FSU is. I still think they're one of the best teams in the ACC, no doubt. From a talent perspective, I think they are the best team in the ACC. But now we're looking at other teams like North Carolina looks better, Miami looks better, Duke looks good. There's some competition to be had in the ACC this year, and that's not something that we could say in most years. So this year, there's probably legitimately 5 solid teams in the ACC, and you can maybe sprinkle Louisville in there for a 6. But I mean, the ACC is probably the best it's been in a long time, or at least early season.
Oh, I agree. Oh, the best it's been in a long time. Yeah, without a doubt. But Thomas Castellanos, the quarterback for Boston College, UCF transfer, I think he had a breakout game. I think that's probably caught FSU off guard, but it could be one of those instances where like that was the game of his life, and then the rest of the season, BC is just very mediocre. I mean, they almost lost to Holy Cross, so I'm gonna
UCF
chalk this
has an
one up
eye
as
for
a fluke.
quarterbacks, man.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Is
for F.
UCF transfers Mikey Keene, everyone?
Yeah, exactly. And now Plumlee's hurt, but we'll get into that later. But yeah, I'm gonna chalk this one up as a fluke for FSU because I really think they were like looking ahead to Clemson, but we'll see. We'll see. Speaking of, do we want to stay in the ACC here? Looking around the board here, Miami took care of Bethune-Cookman.
Oh, we don't even need to
Maryland,
mention those.
yeah, we don't need to mention those. Maryland took care of Virginia. I'm kind of going through chronological order here. How about Illinois and Penn State? I was able to watch this one. I was pretty active in this one because I had some stuff invested in this game. I had both these teams in the team draft. And all I got to say is um Luke Altmaier, you are terrible. There's no other way to put it. I'm sorry. Like that guy, this is a stat line. 15 for 28, 163 yards, 0 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. And keep in mind, Penn State dropped 2 different interceptions as well. So if Penn State hadn't dropped 2 interceptions, Altmaier would have had 0 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Despite that, Illinois still somehow almost covered in this game. And I will say this. I watched that game. I thought Penn State looked pretty good, especially in the second half. I was like, wow, Penn State's looking good. Illinois was looking good too outside of the quarterback. So if not for Illinois' horrendous QB play, I think Illinois would have probably kept this one within a 1-possession game or within 10 or something like that. But yeah, I'm a little salty about losing that cover. But either way, I like what I saw from Penn State, man.
Because I got the cover.
Man, I've been taking some L's on those covers so far this year. But I mean, I like what I saw from Penn State, man. It's a good defense.
Illinois defense is good. Penn State's defense is good. They both have really good defenses. Drew Aller was held into check. I mean, aside from the turnovers, you take away those turnovers, it's a much different game. A much different game.
And you want to be ready for this? You ready for this? What do you think the post-game win expectancy was?
Illinois favored.
Okay, so I should have prefaced. It's surprising, but not like that surprising. So Penn State had the post-game win expectancy, but it was only 51%. So it was 51% of times, basically a coin flip. These two teams play like this again, post-game win expectancy suggests this would be a coin flip. And that's kind of matches up with what I saw at least. But yeah, Luke Altmaier, like, come on, man. Like, Illinois,
put the backup in, he did a lot better.
He did. And I know Penn State's got a great defense. They have an elite secondary. They have a couple first-round picks potentially on there. And they made great plays. But it's like, if you're throwing to a 5'10" white guy, like, why are you throwing a 50-50 ball up against him, against the Penn State DB that could go in the first round? That's all I'm going to say. And it went as you would expected. But anyways.
Well, to keep things in chronological order here, a game that we were all very high on, game that we won some money on, LSU, Mississippi State, 41-14. Absolute shellacking. And hey, Malik Neighbors showed up in that one. Won Gonzo this week's weekly draft single-handedly. I mean, my goodness, LSU, they look like they're at least recuperating from that Florida State loss. So they're showing some grit for sure. What do you take away from this game? Is it good LSU or bad Mississippi State?
Okay, yeah, that's a very good question. Well, we learned after deep diving that Mississippi State-Arizona game that was a game that really Mississippi State was pretty lucky to win. In fact, Jaden DeLora he's Jaden De Reckless, because that man threw like 4 picks, and I would argue Arizona probably should have won that game. And I went back and watched it, and I thought Arizona was the better team. Mississippi State was pretty fortunate. And all the numbers were suggesting, Mississippi State shouldn't be running the ball as much as they should. This is literally an air raid offense that Zach Arnett's inheriting. And now he's just trying to go back to old school, run the ball all the time. It's like you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole is what it seems like. And we were told,
you got a good quarterback.
Exactly. You have freaking Will Rogers. That man's like our age at this point. And they should have an edge on the competition, but they don't. And I think Zach Arnett is kind of strong-arming them this year. I think it's just a tough situation. But my overall point is Mississippi State is a lot worse than we expected. That's why LSU -9.5 was the best bet. And if you're LSU, this is a game that you needed to win and win convincingly. And we were saying this is a good measuring stick for them, and they did it. So I think if you're LSU, you have to be really happy. I wish Gonzo was here, but if I was them, I'd be pretty happy. I think this is what you would have wanted to see. But we still got a lot of football to see them play because, we'll see how FSU does against Clemson.
To me, Shub, I think the least impressive 3-0 teams both lie in the same state, and that's the state of Kentucky. That's both being the Kentucky Wildcats and the Louisville Cardinals. Louisville beats a very unimpressive Indiana team very narrowly, 21-14. They progressed to 3-0, and this is why their win total was so high. It's not because they're a quality team, with Jeff Brom or anything like that in year one. It's because their schedule is sharp and soft. What do you take away from Louisville, just Indiana, if you have any takeaways whatsoever from that? Do you think Louisville is a good team?
Well, I didn't get eyes on it, but I think the final score does a lot of the talking. It's kind of hard to judge Louisville. They haven't played anybody yet. Like you said, you got a 5-point win over Georgia Tech, who's a bottom half ACC team, and that's pretty generous. You beat FCS Murray State pretty good, but that's FCS Murray State, and then a one possession win against Indiana. If you're only getting one possession wins against Georgia Tech and Indiana, I think if you're a Louisville fan, you probably want more than that. But we'll find out here, because after BC next week, they go at NC State, and then they got Notre Dame, and they got Duke, and they got to play Miami later on. So we'll find out.
Well, Shub, speaking of wanting more from your team, what about let's go to a Big 12 country? There's a lot of teams in the Big 12 who are just struggling this year, losing to G5 opponents. Ohio takes down Iowa State 10-7.
You see that video of Matt Campbell getting chirped up by a fan?
Yeah, the fan was saying you're on the hot seat.
I didn't know Matt Campbell was like that, man. Yeah, that's not great. That's not good at all. I mean, listen.
I mean, he is on the hot seat probably. I mean, the program's been in decline since Brock Purdy left.
Which is nuts, man. We were at a point 3 years ago where Michigan fans literally wanted Jim Harbaugh fired, and they wanted Jim Harbaugh fired and replaced by Matt Campbell 3 years ago. Remember when we started this podcast in 2020? That was literally the sentiment. Michigan wanted Harbaugh gone. They wanted Matt Campbell. He was like top of the notch.
This is why you don't listen to fans, because look how that turned out for both programs.
Yeah, man. We want to talk about stock that is like falling to almost rock bottom. I feel like that's Matt Campbell's stock. I mean, it's upsetting, because I like Matt Campbell and I like the Iowa State's program. And I think it's kind of sad to see them kind of fall to where they are. And for some reason, they're kind of like mini Nebraska. They lose all these one possession games consistently. They can't seem to get over the hump.
I mean, Iowa State and Oklahoma State are playing in the toilet paper bowl, for the Big 12 this upcoming week. Loser gets to be the worst team. And speaking of that, just while we're at it real quick, since we're talking about Big 12 upsets, let's just rip the Band-Aid off right now and talk about South Bama absolutely pillaging in Boone Pickens Stadium.
It's a good time for Gonzo to join the pod.
It is. Welcome in, Gonzo. So yeah, Mike Gundy's 3 QB system is proving to be quite a pain in the ass. As an Oklahoma State fan, it's very unfun to watch. Your team get absolutely annihilated by a G5 program, a good one, albeit. But still, did you know that Oklahoma State's current lead passer is Alan Bowman? And 2 things. One, Alan Bowman does not have a touchdown pass in 3 games. And 2, Alan Bowman, being the leader in passing yards for Oklahoma State, at this projected rate will not finish with 1,000 yards passing this season.
Oh, wow.
So Oklahoma State's lead passer will not even eclipse 1,000 yards at this rate. It's like, you thought Iowa was bad last year? This is like a whole new frontier of bad. Because even Petrus, I think, threw over 1,700. So
What kind of blows my mind, Zan, is I'm looking at the stat line right now. And if you told me that Carter Bradley went 10-16 for 152 for 2 touchdowns, I would have been like, okay, that's a decent effort. That's an okay effort, actually, in a losing performance. But then I see the score, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 33-7. Like,
the running backs own the game. Oklahoma State cannot stop the run.
That blows my mind. And I know, like, Jim Knowles getting, like, they have put good coordinators out there where they can get poached by elite programs, but clearly the recovery from Jim Knowles is just not been there at all. I mean, I just don't expect a team like Oak State, a team that, even though they under recruit severely, still very much overperforms, to get blown out by nearly 4 touchdowns at home is very surprising. I'm not surprised that South Alabama won this game, but I am surprised that they won by the margin that they did.
That's the disappointment in it. It's like, as an Oklahoma State fan, you can handle losing, but losing like that is not really acceptable. And just to highlight your comment on the Jim Knowles thing, it's not really a Brian Nardo issue. It's not a defensive issue. It's an offensive issue and an offensive line issue, because Oklahoma State was routinely going in there and going 3 and out. The defense was on the field basically the entire game. If you look at the time of possession, it's very, very lopsided. South Alabama basically had the ball the whole game. So of course your defense, it's a war of attrition. I mean, they got boxed up at the end and gave up 2 touchdowns, really gave it up. And then when Oklahoma State finally scored a touchdown and had a chance to get back in the game, they muffed the punt and gave it to South Bama on their own 20. So it was over right then and there. So really frustrating as an Oklahoma State fan because Mike Gundy refuses to adapt. He refuses to fire his coordinator, who somehow gets worse every single year. I mean, like literally, if you chart it on a graph, it literally does this. It literally does this. Like he always finds a way to top himself in how bad he can be at coordinating. It's almost like he purposely doesn't give the ball to his best players. It's crazy.
Does Gundy have any type of loyalty to Casey Dunn that goes beyond this tenure? Is there? What was that?
They're friends.
Okay. Well. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, the good old.
So
nepotism.
What sucks with Gundy's staff, with Mike Gundy's particular football staff, is they've all been there for a very long time, except for like Brian Nardo. And so they're all very, very good friends. And that's why Gundy doesn't want to fire anyone. He's hell-bent on keeping them there. And so it's a really big issue. And then the 3 quarterback system, I am a little bit of a conspiracy theorist with this 3 quarterback system. I think it's just an excuse that Gundy came up with to play Gunner Gundy. I think if Gunner Gundy wasn't there, they wouldn't be doing a 3 quarterback system. But that's just me.
I reiterate your point about South Alabama. So I'll make my quick point about the victors first, but hey, if you told me this at the beginning of the season, this was going to happen. If you told me at the beginning of the year, South Alabama will beat Oklahoma State at Boone Pickens, I honestly wouldn't have been surprised. I don't think Zan would have been surprised. I don't think any of us would have been surprised because we knew South Alabama was like a sneaky good G5 team this year. And that definitely confirmed this. However, like you guys said, it was the fashion in which they got beat down. And like Zan said, we gave a lot of flack to Iowa, man. We gave out like multiple Zanny bars to Iowa last year for how bad the offense was.
Oklahoma State's going to get one every week.
we gotta call a spade, man. So I think the first official Zanny bar of this week is Zan.
It goes to Mike Gundy.
Yeah, I'll say it on your behalf. It's got to go to Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State.
Yep.
But
100%. Undoubtedly.
Does Oklahoma State make a bowl game this year? Definitely not.
Hell no.
Even with that schedule, even with one of the easiest schedules I've ever seen.
Even with one of the easiest schedules you've ever seen, they might go 4-8.
I was scared of this with the talent attrition too. Losing guys in the transfer portal. And I really wanted to put faith that despite that, Mike Gundy would be able to coach his team to at least a bowl game. But it seems in this instance that Mike Gundy is being his own worst enemy and cannot get out of his own way.
That is true. But let's move on. Let's move on to a team that we all thought was going to be just absolutely dominant. And to their credit, they're still undefeated, but they haven't been dominant. And that's the Georgia Bulldogs, who win 24-14. We're down 14-0 at halftime, or 14-3, something like that. And ended up trying in the second half, came back and beat South Carolina, but they just haven't been dominating their competition as of late. And so that's really interesting for me. If you're a Georgia Bulldog fan, does that worry you? Because Georgia is looking very beatable right now. It's actually the college football race right now for the national championship actually looks pretty wide open. I couldn't tell you definitively who it's going to be at this point, which I actually kind of like.
Oh, it's phenomenal. It's giving me 2007 vibes. Now, will we get that type of year? Oh man, I would love that. Like I would love to just have top teams going down every single week in November, but we'll see. But I agree, man. I one word for this from me. This game was shocking. I was legitimately shocked by this. And I've been hating on South Carolina, I'll admit, but that's only because I put a lot of Shube units on their under win total at 6.5 because
I did as well.
We knew how bad the offensive line was going to be. Defensive line, not great either. I will say this, Spencer Rattler is looking good. Despite the horrendous line of scrimmage play, Spencer Rattler is actually playing well. I mean, he was a 5-star quarterback at the end of the day, so I'll give him credit for that. But I was shocked by this in the first half. I was not surprised when Georgia turned it on and kicked it in the first gear in the second half, but it's like, I bet Georgia minus 27.5. A lot of pundits and that I respect were saying, how bad does Kirby Smart want to just step on Shane Beamer's face in this one? That was the question. How badly is Georgia going to beat South Carolina? And kudos to South Carolina, man. It's a win for Shane Beamer. I would say it's a win of a loss.
A game like this is why I don't give any credence to the Kirby Smart narrative of, oh, some people had a 6-6. They said that last year. Because if you truly felt that, people were sleeping on you and doubting on you, thought you were winning natties because people were getting hurt, and that's why you've been so successful, they would have came out and hung 50 on South Carolina and covered this thing in the first half. What I think is going on is it's a team, it's a program that knows that this is a Charmin soft schedule, and they don't really have to care till Tennessee. And with the way Tennessee's been playing, they may not even have to care at all this regular season. So they know they can win every game by 10 points, and they will get into the college football playoff because they've got the benefit of winning 2 natties, of being in the SEC, and they just stay on cruise control. And I personally think that they are talented enough that when they feel the seat getting a little hot, they can do what they need to do to win.
That's what happened.
I'm personally surprised, that they're not winning these games by larger margins. But again, at the end of the day, you've kind of earned yourself that right to just chill and cruise when you've been the 2-time defending national champion, especially when last season you really dominated outside of the Missouri and Ohio State victories, and then you absolutely just washed TCU off the face of the earth. So even though it's troubling to see Georgia play these tight games and Lad McConkey not play and like a lot of impact guys not play, I'll give them a pass for being the defending champions. Though I will say that if these were some other programs with these kind of situations of being 4 touchdown favorites and not covering, no joke, ESPN would be saying, what is wrong with this program? What are they doing wrong? But
looking at Georgia's remaining schedule, we have to put a big down arrow across the whole SEC East as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at Georgia's schedule, seeing what Tennessee is now, we were talking about how you really got to downgrade Tennessee this year after what we saw last week. Right. You led in my question. After what we know now through 3 weeks, is their biggest threat Ole Miss maybe? I think it's Ole Miss. I think Missouri's maybe more of a threat than Tennessee potentially. I mean, it is in Knoxville, like, granted, but I don't think you look at that schedule and you can't just be like, oh yeah, at Tennessee is like their one game where they might actually lose guys. No, I think it's like there's 3 teams that I equally think have the same shot to beat them. But we'll see.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Another team who's not really performing, let's stay in the SEC, Alabama beating USF 17-3. And when I heard Jalen Milroe wasn't starting and that they're going to, try some new quarterbacks out in this game, I immediately went on my betting site and I picked USF -35, won some money there.
Brilliant.
17-3.
Brilliant.
And Alabama, I mean, they win just because they have the Jimmies and the Joes, but clearly the X's and O's were not there, and that's why this game was so close.
Guys, like, remember how we were being told how this Alabama offensive line was going to be one of like the greatest college offensive lines we've seen in recent history? This offensive line is not that good. USF was getting pressure on the quarterbacks. I was watching this one because I was clearly not paying attention to it. 3-3 at halftime, like, against USF. And just side note, the fact that it was at USF too was just even more hilarious to me.
It's that road environment.
Yeah, like, just seeing Alabama play at USF was just so funny to me. I don't know why, because you never see them play road non-con games against.
That's probably why they don't play road non-con games.
But anyways, just the fact that this was being played at USF is hilarious to me. But then watching Ty Simpson get sacked in the second half, and they needed a lot of help to take the lead away in the second half. And then Tyler Buckner was just downright horrible. Tyler Buckner was 5 of 14. Guys, it's awful. We said the quarterback play wasn't going to be good, but like, I don't think we thought it was going to be this bad. And you just figure, okay, you're playing behind Alabama's skill positions players and offensive line in front of you. You can't be that bad. Like, I think I could go better than 5 of 14 if, make me throw a couple screen passes. I think I could do that.
Yeah. Just hit some dump offs.
I might be able to hit one slant against USF with that offensive line.
Being a game manager is tougher than it looks. And since the Jacob Coker era, they have been spoiled. I mean, they have really had some dudes come in there, and I've alluded to this on past pods, and now they really just got to get through this bridge here to Julian Sand. And I mean, Sand's freshman year might be some learning pains, but if they can find a way to bridge and get to Sand, they'll be okay. But as for the now, yeah, they're in trouble. I mean, I really right now would take, and I'll tell you, I took Ole Miss to beat them on the ZKS picks. Like, I take Ole Miss, I take A&M. Of course, I would take LSU. I told a buddy of mine, this is a good year for LSU to go up to Tuscaloosa. I mean, this quarterback problem is a big deal for the Tide, and the last week showed that. I did hear rumor. Now, this is rumor that maybe Milroe was suspended, and that's why we saw Buckner take those first team snaps. I mean, that's just speculation.
I see. But, so Nick Saban caught him staying the night at the sorority house the night before.
Possibly. But, I mean, clearly Milroe's your best option. Is he the greatest ever? No, but he is the hands down most athletic and gives you the best chance to win.
I think we can all agree that Alabama's way better than this with Jalen Miller at quarterback, though, right? Like with
Jalen Miller, from what we've seen, is definitely the best quarterback in that group,
which is a low bar, but yes, obviously. Now, if Ty Buckner was going to be the starter the rest of the year, yeah, I think Alabama might lose like 6 games with that schedule. With that schedule, yeah. But with Jalen Milroe, I still think there's definitely at least another loss or 2 in there, maybe more. But we'll be conservative here. But I still do like this team a little bit with Jalen Milroe. I just don't like them as a high-end national championship contender. But they can probably get to 10 wins still with Milroe. I mean, we'll see. But, I mean, that's just yikes, man.
Shub, you know who might be the most improved current 3-0 team right now? There's a couple contenders, but I say you can argue Miami, you can argue North Carolina, but I'm going with North Carolina here because they're actually really improved on defense.
Yes, they are.
They have improved on defense. And what we mentioned is if North Carolina can even have an average defense, then they're a very real contender in the ACC, and they can make some noise. But we didn't suspect that could happen. To this point in the season, it looks like their defense is playing a little bit higher than average. Granted, small sample size against teams who aren't known for scoring the ball, especially Minnesota, who really is anemic on offense. But so far, UNC looks the part. They look pretty good. Miami looks really good as well. So really good for the ACC. Duke, I mean, there's a lot of good 3-0 teams right now.
No, I do agree with you. I mean, without a doubt, North Carolina's defense is better, and that's absolutely a good thing. It's just the degree to which it's better. It's still an unknown for me. But I think maybe more so of a story for North Carolina. Drake May hasn't looked super sharp so far in these 3 games. And they've played, they played South Carolina, and they played Minnesota, who's got a decent defense. But against those teams, I still feel like if you're going to live up to what we expect of Drake May, he's got to play a little bit better than that. So I feel like that's more of a storyline for me. What do you guys think?
To your point, Shub, I think at this point, Drake May is out of the Heisman race. I think not throwing any tutties versus App State kind of solidified that. But you still have a very valid chance to compete in the ACC and possibly bring home a conference title if you take care of business. And I think that's the context that Carolina fans need to keep in mind. Because even when they had like Trubisky, which gives me PTSD and makes me shudder when I hear that name, she was there when I saw him get drafted. Even when you had some of these better quarterbacks, winning the ACC was hard to come by. So I think UNC fans need to just appreciate having a quarterback of Drake May's caliber in the program right now and just enjoy him being there and hope you can spring that into beating your rivals and potentially winning the conference.
Now, can I say one thing before we move on?
Absolutely.
One, we got to shout out Nate McCullum.
Yes,
he had 10 receptions.
Yeah, absurd. Like another UNC receiver didn't have any more than 4. One shout out.
Nate McCullum has 16 receptions for the season.
He just decided he wanted to go off in this one game. He's like, I'm done, coach. That was my time. Nah, but my other thing I wanted to say was every positive thing that I said about Athenian, Kaliakmanis, and win totals, I want to retract those statements because, like I said last week, the Greek rifle has been the Greek water
BB
gun.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd say it's more like a water gun, man. I won't even give him the compliment of a BB gun.
You should call him
11 of 29. 11 of
Minnesota.
29. Come on.
I mean, that might work in the Big Ten West, though. That's the funny thing. I mean,
I know, right?
That's the
In the
thing.
Big Ten West, that's competitive.
Man, you stole my hook, man.
So,
I was about to say, despite all that, Minnesota is still a contender for the Big Ten West with Athenian, Kaliakmanis. That's the Big Ten West for you.
I mean, like, I'm not doing it on this pod, but I look at every quarterback in that division, and I'm like, they're all a version of the same typecast of quarterback.
Is
it's
Ben
absurd.
Bryant the best quarterback in the Big Ten West? He may play for the worst team. He may play for the worst team, but he might be the best quarterback in that division.
Do we talk about Purdue in my
Iowa might have the best quarterback. I mean, we can go Big Ten West here real quick.
I want to go Big Ten West.
QB, man.
I wanted to go Big Ten West, but take the Syracuse angle. I watched those highlights, and Garrett Strader had two really thick run plays where he gave it to the running back. Purdue, no cap, thought the running back had the ball, and then Strader basically skipped into the end zone. But that was a closer game, and I do think Purdue eventually, in a few years, will be a half decent team. But I'm really liking that underplay right there.
It is looking good. Yeah. Unfortunately, I took the over on that one, but can't win them all. And speaking of another one,
absolutely can't.
Speaking of another situation where you can't win them all, this is one where we were both on varying sides for the two teams involved, and it's not looking good on my end. Rutgers, Virginia Tech. Rutgers handles Virginia Tech pretty easily, 35-16. Virginia Tech doesn't look very good. Rutgers might hit their over pretty soon.
I told you guys, over by October. That's Rutgers this year. That was my thing.
No, I mean,
I'm gonna give him a Shuby snack. I gotta give Rutgers a Shuby snack. I gotta give it out.
You need to give Kyle Munnen guy. Oh yes, my guy Munnen guy. 3 tutties, 143 on the yards. I don't care if it's Vautech. Anytime you can have a performance like that, it's very impressive. And man, I'm very excited for that UVA Vautech matchup at the end of the year. I mean, that set that total at like 27. I mean, that is going to be just some sicko action to close out the season.
Do you guys remember a certain team that only had like 6 passing yards in week 1?
Are we talking about the FIU Golden Panthers?
You know they're 3-1 now.
They are.
Yeah, I got to stop fading them. They're really getting it together now.
That's
they threw for 200-something yards. Yeah, and if they would have pulled that game off, somehow they were still in that game in week 1. They'd be 4-0 right now.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
They might be the Iowa of the G5.
They really might be.
CUSA, Iowa, man.
I mean, they beat North Texas and at UConn, so it's not like they just played like 2 completely terrible teams. Good for them.
Well, speaking of a terrible team, Michigan State got absolutely boat raced by Washington. So let's just bring that up real quick. Michael Penix is him. All the wide receivers on that team are him. Kalen DeBoer is him. And Tuck was coming too much. And yeah, I mean,
and now
they're coming for his job. So
no, I mean, it's gone. Like it's done. Like, I mean, like fired for cause, you know. I'm very intrigued to see who Michigan State even wants to pursue, because from what I've heard, and this is through podcasts I listen to, their AD department is just kind of a mess. And let's be real. I mean, guys, I really think like all the Pac-12 schools that are entering into the Big Ten are all in a better position than Michigan State is and will be moving forward. So I just don't know who they're even going to attract to take that job.
Luckily, they've got deep enough pockets to do it. And now they don't have to pay the Mel Tucker buyout money.
They just freed up like 70 mil. That does help.
They can take out somebody.
I'm just waiting for the lawsuit, though. Any of these for causes, there's always a lawsuit, you know, and
that is a good point.
If I was Mel Tucker, I'd try to get some of that money. Absolutely. I wouldn't just walk away.
Can you believe that there's people picking Michigan State on the spread here? Like this
Yeah,
was
the one guy who went
this,
0-8. Yeah, makes sense.
yeah.
And you stay full. I like it.
Who in their right mind would have thought Michigan State would cover this game? Like this seemed like free money to me.
People who don't know what the hell they're doing. I mean, I won my two-team parlay with this in there. I won $90 on this game, basically.
Frankly, I forgot this game was in East Lansing, but really, it didn't matter. I'm not going to make that dumb moon comparison I make, but it didn't matter. I mean, apparently half the teams they're going to quit. I mean, this under looks like it's guaranteed, but weird stuff happens. It's college football, but the bottom is out. Like they're gonna get a ton of transfers, and I hate to see that. I mean, this is a team that was making Rose Bowls left and right like a decade ago, and it's just interesting the ebbs and flows of college football.
I just want to give a quick shout out to Georgia State, 3-0.
Yeah,
They have really good running backs.
That's the Fun Belt.
Mr. Carroll
in action right there.
Carroll, yeah, I see.
Who I've taken in our team draft a few times.
I wanted to take
player draft.
Yeah, I took him once, I think, or I wanted to take him, but
I got him.
Speaking of G5, we need to talk about this. Is Fresno State best G5 team out there right now?
They might be.
You know,
we thought losing Hainer, they would take a step back. Nah, not really.
Mikey Keene,
baby. Mm-hmm. Those UCF quarterback transfers, man, they're all. It was the week of the UCF quarterback transfer. Dylan Gabriel had an amazing day against Tulsa. Mikey Keene went off against Arizona State, and Thomas Castellanos had a breakout game against FSU. Literally,
it's great.
They have a litany of transfer quarterbacks all over the place, and they're all doing well.
Do you know who deserves a Shuby snack this week? Who we probably have. I honestly hadn't heard the name until I looked at the box score. Darren Granger. Do you know who he plays for?
I can't even say who that is.
I recognize the name. Crap. I should know this. I recognize
Georgia State's quarterback.
That's right.
Stat line, 27 of 33, 466 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, and 1 rushing touchdown.
Yep. He went the hell off.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, I was looking at him the other day.
You might want to give like a Shuby snack to just that, like we were saying, the Fresno defense. I don't care if it's ASU without Rashada. I don't care if half the team was hurt. When you force 8 turnovers against a Power 5 team in their building and you shut them out, that is an absolute tip of the cap right there. Just an amazing performance.
All right, so I have a couple things I want to cover here before we move on to picks. But first of all, real quick, let's run through some other, because Oklahoma State wasn't the only Power 5 team to get embarrassed by a G5 team.
Cincinnati.
Oklahoma State's may have been the most embarrassing, but they weren't the only one. Cincy lost to Miami of Ohio in overtime, which we were talking about Emory Jones, and that man threw 2 interceptions in this game against Miami of Ohio.
Very embarrassing week for the Big 12. Very embarrassing start to the season for the Big 12.
I mean, I made a short about that if you want to check it out on our channel. But yeah, the Big 12 has lost to 6 different G5 teams so far this year. And again, we got to call a spade a spade. I mean, we trashed the ACC last year for how bad it was. The Big 12, I don't know if it's quite as bad as the ACC was last year, but like the Big 12 might be the worst P5 conference this year. Like it's
this year, it absolutely is. Like 100%. The Big 12 is the worst Power 5 conference this season.
But it's okay because they have cryptocurrency sponsoring the Big 12 championship game. So who cares? Who cares?
Hey, actually, because Texas and OU are technically still in the Big 12, Big 12 may not be the worst conference just yet.
I mean, and you gotta treat the new teams. I mean, that's like your cousin who married into the family. I mean, yeah, like the K-State loss is brutal, but like, some of these games that like Cincy, Houston, UCF, BYU, some of those you got to take with a grain of salt just because they are the newcomers. But that being said, still, yes, overall, the Big 12's performance has been, kind of surprising the first 3 weeks as a league that prides itself on parity. Yes,
there was one good Big 12 non-conference outcome this past week, and it caught all of us off guard because we faded this team, and that was BYU went into Fayetteville and beat Arkansas. Mm-hmm. Kind of surprising, I'd say. I didn't get to watch it, but pretty surprising.
Hey, the Nears too. The Nears beat Pitt.
Oh, that wasn't surprising. We all knew that one was coming.
we did all pick that one, but still. But yeah, man, actually, that was very surprising for me. I did not think BYU was going to beat Arkansas, especially with how BYU played to start the season. They didn't look very impressive. But man, I mean, credit to them. They're 3-0.
Absolutely. BYU is looking like
That over.
a
Take
very,
that
very
over.
quiet. Yeah, BYU
Well,
extremely
their win total is
quiet,
four and a
improved
half. They
team.
need 2 more.
Yes, I was gonna say if you want to talk about like the most underrated improved team so far this year, I think it's got to be BYU.
And they're definitely going to hit their over with how the Big 12's looking. There's no way they don't hit the over.
And that's years of playing these hard independent schedules. They played half the Pac-12 most of these years. So the culture, these rosters, they are conditioned to playing, I'll say elite. Yeah, elite teams consistently. So I do kick myself not taking them to at least cover. Um, you know, Arkansas just they weren't ready. And it's funny how, Sam Pittman, who some pundits praise, the greatest thing, Arkansas is back. Like I heard today, if that man finishes under 500, his buyout goes down ridiculously. So I'm just curious what Arkansas will do if they have another subpar season.
So you want to know post game win expectancy here?
Of course, always.
It says Arkansas should have won this game 96% of the time. And I didn't get eyes on it, but from what I could tell by looking at the stat line, they pretty much bottled up KJ Jefferson. I mean, KJ Jefferson didn't have the greatest passing day, and on top of that, he only ran for 21 yards on 13 attempts.
That's
and
crazy.
I know that's
that's how you beat the Hogs.
Sacks.
You stop KJ.
That is how you beat the
it
Hogs.
does. I mean, when Raheem Sanders isn't there either, it makes it a little more one-dimensional.
And listen, post-game win
man, hey,
expectancy is
BYU and Kansas this week, both 3-0.
Yeah. Either way, it's surprising.
BYU, Kansas.
So good for BYU. I'll give BYU a Shuby snack. Quick little parlay with the SEC here. Guys,
Vandy losing to UNLV.
Vandy losing to UNLV.
Terrifies me with the over. I don't know if they can win 2 conference games.
I don't want to take a victory lap, but I did lean on their under, but I didn't feel good about it. But I'm starting to think that under is looking likely now.
I've completely forgot what I took on that one, but either way,
I feel like you went over with me because we're always.
I might have.
It was 3.5.
We usually bully bully Shub and go together
because it was like it
was 3.5.
I wanted to
believe
believe
3.5. I went under 3.5.
I wanted to believe they were turning a corner, and like you're not going to beat UF in the swamp. History shows for the most part that doesn't happen. And then I just don't think they can quit Missouri and maybe South Carolina. But even if you get South Carolina,
they might be able to beat Kentucky this week. Might be able to.
Yeah,
Kentucky, I like Shub and I were talking about it before you hopped on, Gonzo. I think the 3-0 schools from the state of Kentucky are probably the least impressive 3-0 Power 5 schools that I think are out there, and that'd be Louisville and Kentucky. So we'll see.
I agree.
We want to mention OU.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah, I mean they have a great offense and they annihilated their opponent. Move on.
But yes, but they're looking a lot better than I would have thought at this point.
Yeah, they look. They're averaging 50 points a game.
Gonzo was a higher one on them, so I'll let you speak.
I thought I thought when they get to Red River, it was a guaranteed Texas win. I mean, that game legit might be more competitive. And yes, they've been playing. Yeah. It is. They've been playing subpar opponents, though. I mean, the SMU win is a quality win. I mean, I said Fresno, but SMU is right up there as another solid G5 team. I mean, I think they're going to clean up when they get to the ACC. But OU's in a great spot where with Dylan Gabriel, and then you got Jackson Arnold right there in the reserve if anything happens. I mean, I am happy for Venables because there was a lot of doubt with him. You're going from 2 completely different styles of head coaching. So it seems like the defense is taking on his identity, and I'm intrigued with the Sharman schedule. If maybe I'll get lucky reaching out here blindly, and they'll mess around and win 10 games. Actually,
Jeff Levy's looking good, and Jackson Arnold in his limited time is also looking really good.
Yeah. See, I wanted to find a reason to pick apart this and say, OU's not as good as they're looking so far, but we have a quick head-to-head example with Tulsa. Tulsa played at Washington last week, and they lost 43-10. They got Oklahoma this week, and they lost 66-17. So, quick head-to-head comparison right there. Washington put 3 less touchdowns on Tulsa than OU did. Granted, it's a
Dylan
lot of it's
Gabriel
game
was playing out
script,
of his mind.
but we love Washington.
Maybe it was
But
personal.
it's one of those things where it's like, all right,
Oh,
if you
you
want to
took it
compare them
personal.
head to head,
This is our state.
yeah, OU might be
I would love
legit,
an
man.
OU
And
Washington playoff.
I'm gonna eat crow on the OU under because I took that with personal money, but they are looking very good so far, better than I would have
I
expected.
mean, we'll see. We're definitely in the September feels right now, and like Zan alluded to, Red River is going to be so much fun. It is going to be just high shooting, high scoring. I think they have an actual chance. Like, I really thought going into that Texas had that going away, but considering that OU is actually going to be fielding a quarterback who should be playing at the D1 level, I think it'll be a much different outcome than last year's contest.
So one last game here. We already touched on it briefly, but this
Mhm.
one is worth giving it a minute or two. West Virginia and Pitt, the backyard brawl.
Well,
Listen, we were all on this one. We were on the nears through and through. But I just want to say, did you guys realize that West Virginia only threw 11 passes in this entire game?
Yeah, I mean,
Hey.
so this is why. Hey, let's go back to win totals, and then after seeing 2 weeks of football, this is why I felt so good about taking West Virginia. Remember, Pitt lost their entire D line and their linebackers. They're depleted at that position. Who's the best player on West Virginia? CJ Donaldson.
Yep.
You think they're not going to ride CJ Donaldson down their throat, especially if it works, and especially with the new clock rules? Nah, forget about it.
Yeah, he only went for 102 yards and a tutty on the ground against Pitt.
I mean, and let me say, some people want to act like Jurkovic is some improvement from Slovis. Well, all I know is Slovis threw 2 touchdowns against an SEC team on the road. Jurkovic, and if he's playing hurt, I'll put that caveat if he is hurt. But all I'm saying, he was 8 of 20 for 81 with 3 picks.
He's not a good player.
He did his best Luke Altmaier impression.
Yes, he did. This game was as it intended. It was a rock fight. The West Virginia fans were, going crazy, and I'm really happy for them. I think Neil Brown, barring just implosion in Big 12 play, I think he's found a way to earn another year out there in Morgantown.
They might be a bowl team. We'll see.
Yeah.
Especially the way the Big 12 is looking right now, they might go 6-6 and make a bowl. Surprised you want to mention or give a brief shout out to James Madison, the Dukes, winning 16-14.
Y'all nailed that.
Dukes in back-to-back years are probably going to be the best team that never was because they're not allowed to play in their conference championship. It's crazy.
It's such a shame.
Can you imagine? So the NCAA, James Madison's such a quality program, and the NCAA is basically stripping them of 2 potential conference titles just to move up. That's crazy.
I hate it.
It's so sad, and I know we mention it on every single pod, but it's just it's so bizarre that it's worth mentioning every time. It's so terrible, man. And we don't need to get into the Walker situation with UNC, but it's like the NCAA is actually as tone deaf as it's portrayed to be. It's not exaggerated. It's absurd to me, and it just blows my mind. But we don't have to fixate on that. Is there any last shout outs or games you guys want to cover? Is there anything that we missed? Anything worth mentioning across the football slate? Oh my goodness. The one game that we didn't cover. See, if you are tired of the Dion throating and the media coverage, you came to the right place.
That's too bad. Oh, yeah.
Come to the right place because we put it all the way at the end.
Well, if I may, so I do have a grudge, but this isn't because of a pick. It's for Jay Norvell. You talk all this smack, and then you don't go for it on 4th and 2, and then you don't go for 2. That's soft. And I also hate how he told his players essentially to headhunt. There is no need for that at any level in this sport. And now we get to miss Travis Hunter playing against 2 marquee opponents the next couple of weeks because you were soft and wanted to freaking hurt people out there. And I don't care for that. So that's my grudge, is Jay Norvell being a bad leader, and he should suspend his guy who hurt Travis Hunter. I'd suspend him for 4 games because that's just not acceptable. That's what I have to say regarding that part of the game.
Man, you
Tell
might
'em how
want
you
to take
feel,
that
John,
Saints
bro.
hat off right now because
I know, right?
Bounty
Yeah.
gate.
Hey, that was that.
Sean
Hey,
Payton, man. Sean Payton's entered the chat.
Yeah, I'm playing with you, but I I'll put it this way. All right. Listen, I'm the guy that's like I don't like it when we go too soft, but I agree with you. That was dirty. But from Colorado State's perspective, like you literally had an entire media coverage of Colorado. It was like College Game Day is going to Colorado, Fox went to Colorado, all this stuff, all this coverage. Like they're interviewing all the Colorado players. It's supposed to be like they could at least try to like make it somewhat even. Colorado State didn't even get like any attention. It was like people, I bet half the people there probably couldn't even tell you who the hell they were playing. They were just there because for Colorado. So I kind of don't blame them in a way for doing this. And I mean, they walked the walk though, but this is my point. They walked
did.
the walk.
They outplayed them. Absolutely, they
did.
outplayed
I mean,
them.
95%
Colorado State
win
was
expectancy.
up. Colorado State was up 28-20 with under a minute left, and Shedeur Sanders drops a dime to score a touchdown, and then they get the 2-point conversion to send it to overtime. As soon as they got that 2-point conversion, that's when I hit the group chat and I said,
Yep.
Colorado won. It goes to OT. It's over. Colorado's going to win this game. I do have a little bit of my own small grudge with a kind of a bullshit penalty that got a Colorado State touchdown called back and ultimately cost Colorado State a chance at extending the game. But it is what it is. Colorado wins the game.
And listen, I know Colorado State's 0-2, but my biggest takeaway from this is Colorado State was getting a little bit of hype. They were a lot of people's preseason like G5 surprise team. And then they got smoked by Wazoo in week 1. And we were like, no. Well, Wazoo's looking to turn out pretty solid. I don't think that's anything to be ashamed
Oregon
about.
State game is going to be pretty good.
Yeah.
That's nothing to be ashamed about. I look at Colorado State now, and I'm like, shoot, man, like this might be a team that like could be in contention for the Mountain West at the end of the year. I think this is great for them. If I'm going to be honest, like who the hell would be talking about Colorado State as much as they have, if not for Dion and Colorado, if not for this game? Nobody would even know a thing about Colorado State or be talking about them as much as they have. And maybe it's for, for the dirty stuff. But like, if you're a big believer in there's no such thing as bad publicity, I think you are probably pretty happy if you're Colorado State.
No, I'd agree. I wish Jay Norvell would have just coached like he talked, and he did. He coached well the whole game. It's just like, again, man, like you had a chance to step on the gas and put it away, and you got conservative at the worst time, and that just sucks for them. So, the hype train keeps going on, and it's fun, fast times in Boulder. It was interesting seeing the fans, though. I mean, there were people there where I'm like, you've never watched football in your life. Like, clearly, this is like, this is
absolutely.
And that's fine. Like, everyone has their own fandom. Not everyone's like us, where we sit through, bowlless seasons, and we can tell you the whole person.
This year
fine.
for me,
yeah, I mean, that's absolutely fine. But it's just interesting to see the revival of football in Colorado, and I mean, Zan nailed it. The over is going to hit. Barring an absolute just implosion, and. Good for them, good for Dion, good for, and more importantly, honestly, good for Ralphie. She deserves this. She's works hard, running out there every week. I'm happy for Ralphie.
Even with only winning one game last year, it finally paid off. Run to your heart's content.
Okay,
but I do want to give one more shout out real quick before we end. GJ Kinney, head coach GJ Kinney, first year at Texas State.
Yes.
They're killing it. He's making TJ Finley look amazing. And we remember how bad TJ Finley was at Auburn. They scored 77 points this week. GJ Kinney has turned them into an offensive powerhouse.
That's amazing.
TJ Kinney was former Tulsa quarterback.
Really? Yes, I think I did know that.
Yep.
So far this might be an overreaction, but look how bad Texas State was as a program. They were one of the worst programs in the Sun Belt. They fired their coach, and they got him in there.
He's pretty good. Pretty good coach.
Results. I mean, they went out and beat Baylor in Waco week 1.
He's making TJ Finley look good, making him look really good.
Shout out Texas State. Shout out the Bobcats, man.